Welcome to the Health Revolution, the program that shows you how to have a life of vibrant well-being. In a world full of noisy health trends, we bring you clarity. We reveal the science-backed strategies that truly work in a sea of fads. We explore the physical strength, emotional resilience, and mental mastery. These are the keys to an enriched life. Join us for inspiring interviews with champions who've conquered life's health challenges. Are you ready to unlock your potential to live with vitality and purpose? Then join the Health Revolution. I'm your host, Adriana Morrison, health and fitness expert, speaker, and a mom who understands. Let's embark on this transformative quest. Together, we're about to change the game, starting now. The information provided in this show is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. Viewers should use their own discretion and consult with a healthcare professional for personalized guidance and recommendations. Welcome, everybody. You are watching the Health Revolution, and we're so thankful and excited that you are joining us today. I'm your host, Adriana Morrison, and no matter which way you're tuning into us, please do not forget to hit the subscribe button because we want to stay connected to you. At the very bottom of your screen, there is a tab for show episode notes. Very important for today's episode. Lots of information and reference points that you're going to want to refer to going forward. And I'm excited for what we are talking about today. Today, we're talking about the power of disruption. And what does that mean when we are breaking mediocrity in our life and creating new levels of strength? Not just the physical strength of our bodies, but the emotional resilience. And then, of course, the mental mastery. And our guest today is someone who I'm excited to talk to, because she is somebody who brings a level of energy that allows us to learn and grow. And you'll be excited to learn about her. So first, take a look at this. Meet Dr. Stephanie Barnes, known as the Liberated Lawyer, a healthcare innovation attorney by day, and a passionate advocate for women's empowerment always. Dr. Stephanie is the author of the book, Disruptive Elevation: When Life Does Not Go as Planned, but Goes Exactly as It Should. With a Harvard Law degree and a PhD in organizational leadership, she helps high-achieving women experience joy, fulfillment, and meaning in life. As a TEDx presenter, speaker, and award-winning author, she equips women to make powerful decisions and create the life that they deserve. Today, we'll discover how Dr. Stephanie inspires women everywhere to elevate and liberate their lives. Dr. Stephanie Barnes, welcome to the show. How are you?
Oh, I am fabulous. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to get into it. First of all, I know the Liberated Lawyer. Can you peel away the layers of quite the title and what it means and what you stand for?
Absolutely. Well, as your bio mentioned, or as my bio was read, I do practice law, and I have been an attorney for over 27 years, even though I may not look it. But one of the things that I struggled with for many years was how to describe myself, how to define who I am. And of course, my trade is an attorney. I'm skilled in that fashion. I've worked in that fashion. That's my profession. But I'm more than just my job. And a few years ago, when I was trying to balance between how I show up in my profession that I've gone to school for, and how I represent clients in that respect, and who I am and what my purpose is, I really began to embrace being liberated from a box, from a title. And the Liberated Lawyer is my way of really reconciling the different aspects of who I am. So I practice law by day, but I'm always the Liberated Lawyer because I'm more than just my title. And by liberating myself from that box, it truly enables me to be successful and fulfilled, but also it liberates me to help other women do that as well.
Now, as you've been carving your niche in the professional world and just creating your personal breakthroughs, at what point did you decide, you know what, there is so much more out there. I am carving a niche for myself. I am putting one foot in front of the other for my profession, but at the same time, I'm not going to lose myself in the process. At one point in time, did was there a turning point for you to be like, you know what, I'm reaching for it, I'm going for it?
Right. Well, this began many years ago when I made this decision that I wanted to be a CEO. And it was really rooted in this attempt to establish an identity and to reclaim power. I was working in a situation, a male dominated environment, and wanted to have more visibility and more impact. And I thought about the power and respect that my CEO had. I reported directly to the CEO. So I was like, well, you know what? In order for me to be effective, I need to be a CEO. And I literally went to a mentor. I called her up and I said, I want to be a CEO. Can you help me? And I remember how she paused, like, what do you mean you want to be a CEO? But that quest to be this title really cast me on this journey to find who I am and to find how I can influence and lead others regardless of the literal title that I hold. And so in the course of trying to, figure out how to be in this role, I learned about the power of influence and the power of purpose and the power of connecting with others in a genuine way. And that really allowed me to free myself from thinking that I needed to have a title to be effective and to show up in my full self. So that started, I don't know, at this point, about 15 years ago. And I've gone through iterations of that because, as I've mentioned, I've struggled with, how do I really break away from being a lawyer and who am I really? I honestly, at one point, actually retired from law, and but realized how much I did love it, and I have figured out how to reconcile those two things.
One thing that I'm fascinated by your backstory is that you went to Harvard Law, and
Yes.
so and I can only imagine the type of environment, the type of resilience and
Mhm.
determination and
Yes.
nose to the grindstone. And then, of course, being a woman, being a minority woman,
Mhm.
as far as that's concerned, and the percentages being smaller and smaller representation. Did you
Mhm.
ever find that the pressure was on for you to deliver, or have you always had that that just the grit to decide this is exactly what you want to do?
I think a combination of both. Because when I went to Harvard, I'm from a small town in Mississippi, and I graduated from an HBCU in Mississippi, Tougaloo College, a itty bitty little college right outside of Jackson, Mississippi. And when I decided to even apply to law school, I was the first person, I think, in about 20 years who had ever even attempted to go to Harvard from my undergraduate. And I just knew I wanted something different. I knew I wanted to expand my horizon. And of course, there were good law schools in Mississippi, but who would pass up on the opportunity to go to Harvard? And I had a very great mentor, Dr. Horvath, who encouraged me to apply. And once I got there, I mean, of course, it was a brand new world, but I was determined to find my own place. And over the years, there, especially I came back to Mississippi to practice for a little while. Went to Texas first and then eventually to Mississippi. But I would often encounter people who, kind of had a little question about, well, how did you get into Harvard? And I knew what the "you" meant when,
Oh, well, here we
when they
go.
asked that, right? And the thing is, I was able to hold my own. Nobody gave me a Harvard law degree. I earned that, and I have it hanging up in my work office very proudly. But I'll tell you, one of the things the last time I went to the Harvard Law campus was in 2016. We have every 5 years or so, it's thrown off a little bit since COVID, but a celebration of Black alumni. And I went back on the campus and was really grappling with a lot of things at that time. And at that time, the school was making a decision to change its crest. If you're familiar with Harvard, for me, it was founded by the royal family. Um, and they sold slaves to found the law school. And so it's always had this conflicting history. And they use the family crest for the law school's um, signia. And at the time, the school was transitioning from that, and it was just a controversial period. And all of us who were there were very reflective. But at that time, and it's actually kind of what launched me on the path that I am on specifically now, was reconciling. I wrote an article in the Huffington Post called My Love Hate Relationship with My Harvard Law Degree. And I talked about the conflicts between feeling a sense of belonging there, but also recognizing the conflicting history of the campus and my trials in terms of being in the legal profession and reconciling even my own piece around having graduated from there. So it's been a constant navigation, and now I'm fully um, in all of my power in terms of my Harvard Law degree. I earned it, and I have no shame about it.
One thing I love, and thank you for sharing that. One of the components of our show is the conquering of mental mastery. And
Hmm.
oftentimes in life, the space between our ears can get us really stuck, or we can be in a situation where it then keeps us stuck,
Right.
our mindset. And I love how you reflected, but then also, you know,
Hmm.
there's this level of moving forward, that you're not staring at the rearview mirror. And I once heard this phrase, and it's a common phrase these days, or I'd like to think that the windshield is bigger than the rearview mirror. And so I love the idea
Right.
of you reflecting on this. And have you always had that mindset of, you know what, I've made this decision, I'm going to see it through, in spite of how things integrate or how
Right.
difficult things integrate?
I think I've always had that sense. I've always been very determined to expand my capacity. Because as I mentioned, I grew up in this itty bitty little town in Mississippi and was very fortunate to be exposed. My Aunt Demetria and my Uncle Ronnie, I'm very grateful for their investment in me, in allowing me to see beyond my current circumstance, or then current circumstance. So I was afforded the opportunity, even as a child, to be adventurous. And I have an adventurous spirit, honestly. And I was just always determined that, whatever it was I put my mind to, that I was going to be able to do it. And about, I guess, 7 or 8 years ago, I really began to articulate the power of decision and the power of deciding. And I love the word decide. At its root is the root word side, Latin word side, which means to kill or cut off. And many times we don't realize the power of our decisions. And when we make a decision, we cut off all other options but what we have focused on. And that is something that I've taken to heart and really focus on harnessing the power of my decisions. So once I make a decision that this is what I'd like to do, then I cut off all other options and truly focus on how. And how is a very powerful question. When we ask ourselves how, we open up possibilities in our minds. I believe it triggers the energy that's needed to be above and beyond whatever the obstacle is. So whenever we're faced with a difficulty, with a barrier of any kind, we should begin to ask how. And when we ask ourselves how, I believe we position ourselves to be able to move forward.
So in this regard, you've raised the bar on yourself, so to speak, and literally and then figuratively speaking. And then has that always been the case in terms of your physical health and your and where you are and how you carry yourself to take care of you, your body, your just what your health and wellness looks like?
Well, I have that has been a journey, I will say, because in high school, I was a majorette. I twirled the baton in high school. And when I went to Mississippi State, which is where actually I started my freshman and sophomore year at Mississippi State and transferred to Tougaloo where I graduated. But I was a majorette on the twirling team for Mississippi State. I was the first and I believe the only majorette of color, only Black majorette. And at that time, I had never really contributed a lot of effort in my physical appearance. I was naturally small, and I thought I looked and felt healthy. But at that time, the majorette squad had a very strict weight limit. And if you were above that weight limit for your height, you could not take the field. And it was the first time that I really began to question my health in terms of how it showed up in my physical experience or physical appearance, rather. And I actually developed an eating disorder during that time. I developed a very unhealthy relationship with my body image and with food. And so over the years, I oscillated between sizes and especially once I had children. And but I was always very committed still to getting back to being healthy, regardless of how I looked physically. And growing up in the Mississippi Delta, physical health oftentimes is something that is not of high importance, diet and lifestyle. And I watched my granny Ethel, which is the woman who really inspired my adventurous spirit. I would say a lot of the power that I have around decision making came from learning from my granny Ethel. But one of the things that I noticed over the years that as her physical fitness declined, so did her mental fitness. And eventually, I feel like, her mind and body just went on a decline. And I made a decision that, that was something that I didn't want for myself. And so my granny inspired me to remain focused on my physical health so that I can show up fully mentally and beyond. And in the past few years, I've really recommitted to my fitness. It started actually with the illness. I got really ill in 2019, developed all these weird allergies and I had to cut out a lot of things out of my diet to figure out what I was allergic to so I could regain my health. Long story short, I took advantage of that disruption. It disrupted my health, it disrupted my life, but it helped me to really jumpstart my fitness effort, and I haven't looked back since. And in fact, earlier this year, I decided to train for a bodybuilding competition, and I entered my first competition at the age of 51. And I never thought that I would ever be able to accomplish that, physical feat with resculpting my body. And I'm so grateful that I did because it taught me a lot about mental resilience, as well as it busted a lot of myths about aging.
True. And I mean, breaking that glass ceiling is absolutely real. And, and one of the things I want to do is I want to talk about the power of disruption. And
Mhm.
so then coming up after the break, we're going to dive into Dr. Stephanie's book and so that we can share that. So with that, we're going to take a commercial break. Stay right there. We're coming right back. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back after this. Hi everyone, Adriana here, and welcome back to Fit Bites. Today, let's talk about Alzheimer's, a progressive disease that affects memory and cognitive function. Now, it's important to recognize these early signs so you can support your loved ones. Now, one of the most common signs is memory loss, especially forgetting recent events or information. Now, people with Alzheimer's may also have difficulty with problem solving, confusion with time or place, trouble with familiar tasks, or mood changes. Now, if you notice these signs, it's crucial to seek medical advice for proper diagnosis. Early intervention can help manage symptoms and slow progression. Supporting a loved one with Alzheimer's can be challenging, but small steps can make a difference. Start by creating a routine to reduce confusion, offering gentle reminders, and helping with day-to-day tasks. Stay patient, be understanding, and encourage activities that engage the brain, like puzzles or listening to music. You don't have to do it alone. Reach out to support groups or organizations that can provide resources for caregivers. Remember, showing love, patience, and support goes a long way in helping someone through this difficult journey. Stay tuned for more Fit Bites with Adriana. Welcome back to the Health Revolution. We're talking the power of disruption in a very good way in our lives. Our guest today, Dr. Stephanie D. Barnes, she's a fulfillment strategist, CEO, author, all the things. And before the break, we were talking about just really elevating and deciding to take charge. And she was sharing with us the experience of doing bodybuilding at the age of 51, on top of being an attorney and all the things. And so, Dr. Stephanie, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Obviously, you've reached a level of high achievement in so many ways, and there's nothing that is stopping you. What are some of the challenges that high achieving women face when it comes time to tackle life, to be on a certain path? What are some things that come up along the way?
Well, disruption. The thing is, a lot of times with high achieving women, we are excellent at planning and strategizing and execution. We get things done. And so we get accustomed to a certain level of achievement. But the fact is, life does not always go as planned. And many times when we are faced with those disruptions, we take it personally. We think that it is some kind of indication that we've failed or that we've not done enough, or somehow it is a negative reflection on our abilities. And it's important to recognize that disruption is a part of life, first of all. And if you focus on the how and you focus on your decisions to keep moving forward, you will find that oftentimes disruption elevates you rather than create or take away from your life. And I think as a high achieving woman, we have to realize that a disruption is just that. It is a natural part of life, and we have the power to not only overcome it, but to create an even better outcome when we embrace the elevation properties, if you will, of disruption.
I want to segue into your book and talk about, I have your book right here. Let's talk about it. Disruptive Elevation: When Life Does Not Go as Planned, but Goes Exactly as It Should. Talk about when you wrote the book, and let's dive into this. What was the message behind it?
Right. Well, when I wrote this book, it was after having gone through a series of disruptions. And it began in 2014 or so, when I began to transition from the first stage of my career. And 2014 was the genesis of many disruptions that really caused me to question my own capabilities, because at that time, everything I had done worked out exactly the way I planned it. I've always been a planner. I've always been a master strategist, hence my current role as a fulfillment strategist. And the truth is, at up until that point, I'd kind of been doing things going along. I'd never really pushed myself beyond that current comfort zone. And around that time, I began to experience disruption after disruption after disruption. In 2014, that's when I decided to retire from my career. I was an executive for a health system at the time. And I was just like, forget this. I want to do something else. And I actually launched a speaking and coaching career. The next year, we moved from a place in Mississippi where we lived for 11 years. We moved to a place I absolutely hated. And about 10 months after I moved there, my then husband of 21 years asked for a divorce. And that was something I never thought would happen. And again, a disruption. And after my divorce was final, I decided that this was truly an opportunity to create the life I desired and deserved. And I set out on that course and moved to Atlanta, Georgia. This was the first place I ever had an opportunity to choose for myself. My former husband is a physician, and so we always moved where his job led us. And since I had been released from that marriage and from that life, I decided to move to Atlanta and begin my career anew. Well, that didn't go exactly as planned either, and I experienced a series of what at the time I thought were failures, but it really was just an iteration and a cyclical process of getting to where I am now. But I wrote the book, one, as retrospective in moving through kind of how that disruption led to elevation and the revelations I had along the way, but also to be prospective in encouraging myself for the next chapter in my life and the next book, which I believe is being created as I live my life. So, disruptive elevation came about from a powerful decision to see the disruptions in my life as an opportunity for something better, as an opportunity for elevation, and recognizing the promise that lies in the disruption. Life doesn't always go as planned, meaning it's not 1, 2, 3 all the time, but it goes exactly as it should. And it goes exactly as it should when we embrace the opportunities that flow from change.
And you bring up a good point. I think that oftentimes when things don't go the way we perceive for them to be or that we want for them to be, that's uncomfortable. That's yucky. And so we don't like that. I'm frowning when life throws a curveball. And
Right.
so oftentimes I can see and I remember so very many times where I couldn't naturally embrace it. I had to will myself to embrace
Right.
what you are describing as disruption because it just doesn't feel terrific. And
Right.
so that's been it's been a little hard whenever I've thrown, and honestly, I can relate to what you're saying because my first marriage, when it came to an end, I knew I can pinpoint when I knew we weren't going to last. And those moments of just where change and hard decisions had to be made. Man, that was tough. But then it opened up opportunity to, okay, let me strategize and let me decide. And so, in hearing your story, that resonates so loudly, in making decisions that were different than how you did before.
Right.
And so
Right.
that's huge. And I want to read. I have so for our viewers, I do have a copy here. This is this fabulous book, and I just want to take an excerpt from this. This is chapter 3, and I'm just going to read a little snippet of this here. I love how you say you must always choose to jump. In life, you will face many digressions, diversions, and disasters. Whether they derail you or not depends on the choices in how you respond. No
Mhm.
plan that you have should be static. Instead, they must all be dynamic, enabling you to constantly respond and to anticipate changes beyond your control that affect your strategy and execution. Don't be committed to a plan to the detriment of your outcome. I think that's huge. Don't be committed to a
Yeah.
plan to the detriment of your outcome. Can you share a little bit more? Say more about what that means and
Right.
how we can really take away from that.
Right. And, I go back to how I had planned for my life to go. When I graduated from Harvard, I had this specific plan about how my career, or actually before I graduated, how my career would flow, how many years I was going to practice in New York City for 5 years, and then I was going to go somewhere else and practice a different way. But I had it all planned out. And that plan was great, but it also boxed me in a lot of times. And I think that when I learned to embrace life as a fluid process rather than it's from point A to point B to point C, and it must absolutely go to D, then I realized that, life truly is dynamic. And a lot of times, we are so committed to completion. We are sometimes committed to completion to our detriment. Relationships. This marriage must last forever. And if it doesn't last forever, it's a failure. And we will stay in situations where we're unhappy because we got to see it through. Same thing with jobs. We have to stay here for a certain number of years, or we need to do it this way. There's so many different ways that we get committed to a path that we turn our blinders on blinders. I guess I should do it this way. We turn our blinders on, or put blinders on, to all of these possibilities that are out here. And especially if something, we run into something that is a barrier. If we are so committed on, well, the only way I can go, I got to go straight. But there's this thing, there's this circumstance, there's this happening that's in my way. We lose sight of the fact that, you just go on around that. Or you can just go in a totally different direction. Or, wow, there are all these possibilities over here that I never thought about, but now I can pursue those. So that's really what it's about, is opening our eyes to the possibilities beyond what we see and what we're doing presently, and not boxing ourselves in.
How frequent is this scenario amongst different generations? So I'm with you, Gen X, of course, part of Gen X, but then we're looking at even baby boomers who are still with us and still moving one foot in front of the other, millennials, Gen Zs. How common is this? And how often are we seeing this across the board
Right.
amongst generations?
Right. Because I think Gen X and above, Gen X and baby boomers, we kind of grew up thinking of life in terms of a ladder. You go up, you go step by step by step. And we, I believe, in many instances, get caught up in the way we should be doing things. And I'll tell you, one of the most eye opening conversations I ever had, and it truly just expanded my capacity, was with a millennial. We were at a networking activity here in Atlanta, as a matter of fact. And he said to me, we were talking about change from the perspective of a career. And he said, we need to think about our careers like a jungle gym rather than a ladder. And in his analogy, he said, with a ladder, you only go up, and that's the only way you look. How can I go up? But with a jungle gym, you can go sideways, you can slide, you can swing, you can do all of these things. And it really opened my eyes to thinking about life, one, through the millennial lens, but also just from a more expanded capacity. And I believe that, because you see all of these memes and different things in social media about the battle between boomers and Gen X and millennials, and now is it Gen Z and Alpha and so forth. And I believe that we can all learn from each other. And one of the beautiful things that I believe millennials have contributed to us and freed us in many ways is this freedom to move and this freedom to change. One of the one of the herald differences between the way millennials view jobs and boomers is boomers, were committed. You stay at a place and you retire from there and you're loyal to the company. And millennials are like, shoot, if this isn't working for me, I'm going somewhere else. And that's really the best way to be. You know, we only get one life to live. I always say life is too long to be unfulfilled. And many times we box ourselves in because we get committed to the strategy rather than the experience and the outcome. So we have a lot to learn, I believe, from each other.
Absolutely. I want to take another excerpt of this. So on page 96 of your book, Disruptive Elevation, you mention here, you said, so let me break it down. Our lives are the product of our choices. Every result in our life is the outcome of a choice that we make. That is true when it is influenced by something someone is doing to us. We're not the products of others. We're not the products of others' choices unless we choose to be affected by them. That's huge. At some point in our adult lives, we must take responsibility for ourselves, even if our parents have given us a horrible start by their choices, and even if our parents have provided us a great start by their choices. We must choose the path our lives will take. I love when you say we are not the product of others' choices unless we choose to be affected by them. What do you tell the viewer, especially the woman who's watching, who's like, gosh, I'm looking at this Harvard grad and she is all the things and I am not, but I want to be like her. What do you say to her if a woman feels like that's such a feat to reach?
Yeah. Well, first of all, my path is my path and her path is hers. And it's really powerful when you embrace the beauty of your own path. You don't have to go to Harvard Law to be fabulous. And whatever path you're on, when you choose, you create the beauty along your own path. So that's the first thing I would say. And, reflecting back on that passage, our life truly is a product of our choices. And some of us are given silver spoons, and some of us are hit upside the head with a shovel or something, analogously, obviously. And regardless of the situation, what happens after that, we do have a choice. We have a choice to be resilient. We have a choice to look beyond our present circumstance and find other opportunities. And again, going back to the power of decisions and the power of that word to kill off or to kill or cut off, we truly have the power to decide for ourselves what is beautiful for us or what a meaningful life is for us. And certainly we can learn from others. And I do hope that there are women who hear my story, who see me, who get to know me, who are inspired by what I've done with my life. And I hope even more, though, that they use that inspiration to decide for themselves, how am I going to create my own fabulous in this world?
Do you notice the commonality of maybe this struggle or this navigation of a woman growing into her, and even men who are watching, but women growing into that new voice, wanting to do so, that it transcends among different cultural backgrounds, different races? Have you noticed that level of commonality that, say, we hold?
Yes, yes. And when I started on this path, as I mentioned, I was a executive for a health system, and at that time, I was the only woman executive outside of nursing, and I was the only woman of color. Period. Only leader of color. But I looked around the team that I had, I looked around that organization, and I saw so many women of different backgrounds, women of color, white women, different ages. And I saw so much potential. And what I realized is that all of us had the ability to lead. And as a matter of fact, I started a leadership development program aimed at getting more women at the table because I didn't want to be the only one and I didn't want to be the only woman of color. It was cool. I had that distinction, but I believe in alliances. We are more powerful when we have alliances than we are by ourselves. But I sought to tap into the power of all women and to realize and to help us all to realize the power we have when we work in concert and when we support each other. So there some of the issues that we face as women are going to be the same across the board. And of course, they are exacerbated by socioeconomic status, exacerbated by race and ethnicity. Some of us are going to experience these challenges differently or more acutely. But at the core of all women is this innate ability to lead that only needs to be tapped into and brought to the surface.
I love that. And I want to talk about the power of communication and where this can take us with the power of disruption per
Mm.
Dr. Stephanie. First, we're going to take a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to tackle just that. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back after this. Thank you so much for watching The Health Revolution. Our show is growing, and it's all thanks to viewers like you. No matter how you found us, please hit the subscribe button so we can stay connected and continue to deliver amazing content to you.
Introducing Launchpad, the perfect partner to help you launch your dream project to the world. We know that time is of the essence, and we're here to help you make the most of it. With Launchpad, you'll get access to the most advanced digital tools and strategies to take your idea from a mere concept to a fully fledged success. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or a seasoned pro, we have everything you need to make your mark in the world. Launchpad, your ultimate launch partner.
We can take our own health into our own hands. Okay, so we'll kind of expand on that. So I take a lot of vitamins every day. Long before I started this business, my wife has had me taking my vitamin C, my B complexes, amino acids every single solitary day, and I still do, even though I still do IVs as well. But when you take vitamins orally, you get 15 to 20% of them. Some people get less because they have autoimmune issues. Some people have a lot of inflammation issues, whatever the case may be, so they don't get the absorption that they need to be getting. So they don't get their immune system built up. Doing the mobile IVs, I'm able to take your immune system, I'm able to naturally boost it.
Welcome back to The Health Revolution. We're spending quality time today with our guest, Dr. Stephanie D. Barnes. She's a fulfillment strategist. She wears many hats, including CEO, attorney, and also a best-selling author. We're talking about the power of disruption. And Dr. Stephanie, before the break, you shed light into the regardless of race, ethnicity, background. There's a lot of common space that we hold in creating those breakthrough moments. And you talk a lot about powerful decisions. And what would you say are some key elements for women to consider, all people to consider when it comes to making a decision for the better, taking those opportunities to elevate your life?
Well, I have distilled this concept into what I call living life in the and. And living life in the and is using our choices and strategies to create the life we desire and deserve. And it stems from sometimes looking at life as a series of choices that are either or. I can be successful or fulfilled. I can be a mother or a career woman. I can do this or that. And I believe that when we begin to embrace life from the perspective of living life in the and we ask that powerful question, how, we position ourselves to truly expand our capacity. And it is so important, in particular for women, to challenge the choices that we've been given, because there are social norms, societal norms, or gender expectations that say that we must do this or that, or even in some instance where we are castigated for trying to exert our leadership, because we know that in some instances a woman being a great leader is not looked as being a great leader, is being looked at as, ambition is not a good word for a woman to seek. And sometimes when we use the power of our voice to express our thoughts and to advocate for our positions, we're not always well received, where sometimes our male counterparts can do it the same way or worse, perhaps, but they're seen as a good leader. And we have to continuously push against those norms and to continue to use our voices even when they are not valued initially, and look for ways to not put our own selves in a box because of how someone else perceives us. And you mentioned that, I'm a TEDx presenter, and one of the things that I focused on was the gender discourse, or discourse around gender and leadership, and how we often characterize leadership as feminine or masculine, when really it's just two elements of being a good leader. And there's nothing that's for just one gender or the other. We have to look at it from the perspective of how do we embrace all of those elements, regardless of being man or woman, into being the best leader that we can be.
And I know that you wear many hats. One of them is it has to do with that phrase, living life in the and. And I want to talk about your podcast as we bring up a little bit of information here. Talk to us about your podcast and all the info behind it.
Right. Well, as I mentioned, it's built off of this concept of living life in the and it's truly something that I apply to my own life, and I want to empower other women. And I believe in the power of conversations. I also believe in the power of different experiences. And as you know, I also have my PhD in organizational leadership, and I did my dissertation on the influence of media on how women see themselves as leaders, particularly young girls. And I know that sometimes how we are presented in terms of leadership, or how leadership is presented for women, is again in this box. And I want us to think outside of the box. I want us to truly live life in the and most of all, I want women to use the power of their choices to decide to be successful and fulfilled. We don't have to sacrifice one for the other. So the podcast is a series of powerful conversations. Sometimes it is a monologue, musings from the mind of Dr. SDB, where I share poignant thoughts that help women to live life in the and I also have what I call a conversations, libations, and revelations, which is a girlfriend talk with purpose. I have some really smart girlfriends, and I've met some really smart women, and we communicate mostly through our conversations, and they can truly be powerful. And then the last type of segment that I have is a Living Litas section, where I interview women who are powerful in their own respect and learn from them how they have chosen to live life in the and most of all, how they define success. Because it doesn't have one definition. It truly is something that we have the power to create for ourselves.
How often are your episodes? How often do they roll out, and where can we find them?
Well, you can go to the Linktree link rather is there on the screen appropriately, but you can go there and find the podcast on your favorite platform. But I release episodes every Friday, and I mix it up. Sometimes it's one of those three kinds, but you will always find a very powerful conversation that's also a little entertaining. I don't believe in being boring, so we add a little flavor to it as well.
That's fantastic. We're going to take a quick commercial break. Stay right there. We're coming back. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back after this. welcome back to the Health Revolution. We've been spending quality time with our guest today, Dr. Stephanie D. Barnes. She is a fulfillment strategist and all the things, author, podcast host, all of that. And Dr. Stephanie, where can we find you in the virtual space in addition to that?
Well, I'll make it very easy for you. I'm at Dr. Stephanie D. Barnes on all platforms. You can go to my website, actually, drstephaniedbarnes.com, and it gets you to everything. You can get to my podcast, my blog, The Liberated Lawyer, and find out any information you have about me or reach out to me via email. But go to drstephaniedbarnes.com and you can get to any platform where I am.
You know, one other thing that I wanted to read from your book, Disruptive Elevation, there's the one little snippet that I absolutely love here on page 131. You said, joy will not come until you believe it will come and you act like it. You act like you believe it. That's huge. You must see it before you see it. You must say it is so you can be it. You must be joyful even when you think it will not last. I think those are powerful words. And in addition to this, is there anything that you want, if there's just one theme or idea you want our audience to take away with, what would it be?
Well, that would be the concept that, or the feeling that life is too long to be unfulfilled. You're only given one life, and don't wait until some distant point in the future when things are all perfect. You have the power to create joy, the power to create fulfillment, the power to create the life you desire and deserve right now when you decide to go get it.
And I'm curious, what do you have going on for the rest of 2024 and 2025? I know that you're a TEDx presenter. I know that you've lent your voice. What can we expect of Dr. Stephanie coming up?
Well, I've got a couple of exciting things that are going on for the rest of the year. Ongoing, I provide VIP days where I coach women and help them specifically to develop their blueprint for their lives. But I am so excited about an upcoming retreat that I'm partnering with another phenomenal woman to help women to have an opportunity and a safe space to really be reflective on how they are going to create the life they desire and deserve. And of course, if there's a listener who is interested in that, you can send me an email go to my website and we will send you an invitation. But it's a really special opportunity to help high achieving women in particular to do something we have a hard time doing. And that's to stop for a little while and give some time to ourselves so that we can begin to create the blueprint for where we want to go forward.
I tell you, I love retreats because that means life stops and you put the focus on you first. And so all of the benefits from that. So I'm excited to hear of the upcoming events that you have. And Dr. Stephanie, thank you so much for being here, spending time with us and sharing your knowledge and wisdom and insights and your book, Disruptive Elevation. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It has been indeed a pleasure. And as always, I love a great conversation. And I'm just so proud of the work that you're doing. And thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And for all of our viewers, of course, you can find us on the web. Our website is thehealthrevolutiontv.com. That's where you can subscribe to our newsletter. You can also email us with any show episode ideas that come to mind. Upper left-hand corner of your screen, you'll see our QR code. Feel free to grab that as the crow flies. And then, of course, as to be expected and counting on it, you can find us on E360 every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. That is all the time that we have today. Until next time, take care of yourselves. We will see you soon.